Unstable Games, the creator of Casting Shadows and Happy Little Dinosaurs, has been coming out with quite a few games recently, not to mention Command of Nature. They've also just released Fishy, Squishy, Crusty, and Quirky. So let's learn how to play. First off, we're going to start with something that's actually pretty important for this new game. There's a whole section here for it, Captain's Code, which is all about the card placement facing in the game. It basically comes down to whichever way the card is facing, either on the table or in your hand or in somebody else's hand, that's the way it stays facing. So if it's facing away from you, it stays facing away from you. If it's facing towards you, it stays facing towards you, which will make more sense later on. So first you need to set up your pier, which is, basically it's a fishing based game, so all the things are fishing based. So to start off with, you have your Fisherfolk, which are the ones with the little hooks on the back. And these little guys. And you're going to separate them from the regular deck, shuffle them up, put them over to the side, and draw 3 of them. And then you'll need a space for like a discard pile for them also. Then you're going to have what's referred to as the open sea, where you're going to take your normal cards, split them up into 4 stacks. So you're going to take your normal cards and put them into 4 stacks like that. Now when you do that, you're going to take the top 6, so the top 2 from each one, put them face up, and then shuffle them back into the deck. So that way then you'll have some cards that are actually faced up, which is important later on in the game. And then that's where you put the Fisherfolk. Then you also have your order cards, which makes up the market. And then these are special catch of the day cards, which we'll go over in a little bit. And look at this, they have the little fork and spoon on them. As you can see too, there are tokens, little tokens here that look like sand dollars, called sand dollars. There's a 3 on the one side and nothing on the other side, just equals 1. So now that you have your pier set up with your Fisherfolk, the open ocean set up with your normal cards, your market set up with your order cards and your catch of the day cards, you're ready to get going. Now, in the open ocean with the sea creatures, there are 5 different types designated by color. And also a little symbol there. These are the fishies, crusties, quirkies, squishies, a different color. And then there's a rainbow one, which can be one of any of them. And just when you play it, you have to say which one it is. And the last thing about these is that they all have point values, 5, 10, and 15, which we'll talk about a little bit when we get to the orders and the market and whatnot. Also in the creature deck is flavor cards, which they don't have any point value, but they change the type of cards that you have. So say you need a fishy card and you don't have one, you can use this to change one of your cards to a fishy card, which we'll talk about more when we get into the orders. Now, on to the orders. There are a bunch of orders, and basically what you do is you need to have the requirements. You need to have, like for this one, you need a fish, and you need a crustacean and crusty, and you need to have 20 points worth of cards. Now, you just have to have one of each, and then you can have any other number of cards that equal up to the 20 points to fulfill this order. And then when you fulfill the order, you get the reward, which is the sand dollars. And that's important for later on at the end of the games, how you win and whatnot. And then there's also catch of the day, which they all just need one type. But you see how next to it, it says only. So you can only have crusties. And then you got to have the points. And then for them, you still just get whatever the reward is, which is only 1. You have your table set up. You went through all the different cards and whatnot, and the tokens and everything. Now you're ready to play. So how to play? Now to start off with, nobody has any cards in their hand, which is unusual for a card game, but this is an unusual card game. The first person who goes, there are 4 phases. There's the higher phase, where you pick one of the Fisherfolk that you want to have for that turn. Once you pick one, you immediately draw another one from the deck to take its place. And they all have different abilities here, different effects that they can do during the turn. So you want to look at them and choose wisely depending on what your strategy is for the turn. Now the second phase is flip. You choose one card in your hand that is facing away from you and flip it to face towards you, which is part of the whole thing where all the cards' facings don't change, how they're on the table or how they're in somebody else's hand or something, or in your hand. And then you grab it, and then you can use the flip phase to then make it flip towards you. And then phase 3 is fish, which you do one of the following actions. You can add 2 sea creature cards that are facing down, like away from you, in the open ocean to your hand facing away from you. Since they're on the table facing away from you, they stay facing away from you in your hand. Add one face up sea creature from the open ocean to your hand. So then it would still be facing you, since when it was on the table, it was facing you. So when it goes to your hand, it's still facing you. Stays in the same orientation. Cards do not change orientation except in phase 2 where you can flip. Take one sea creature card from somebody else's hand that's facing you and add it to your hand and it's still facing you. Since it was in their hand facing you, it'll still be facing you in your hand. And then that other player can add a card from the open ocean that's facing down to their hand to basically replace it, but it still has to face away from them when it's in their hand. Again, you don't change the orientation of the card at any point other than the flip phase, or if there's like a Fisherfolk or something that lets you do that. And then the fourth phase is fulfill orders. Like if you can fulfill, the order, you just have to use whatever cards you have to fulfill it, and then you get your reward. Now these, you can fulfill as many of these as you possibly can in your turn, but the catch of the day cards, the red ones, you can only fulfill one per turn. Now at the end of your turn, you can take your Fisherfolk, put them in the discard pile for the Fisherfolk, because then in your next turn you get a different one. Another thing about the cards that I didn't mention before, these are the regular creature cards that are in the open ocean. You see how the back, it's just the ocean. Well, there are some of them, if I can find it, there we go, that it has a little like shadowed. They're called shadowed cards. And like this one has the fish symbol. So you know that's a fish. So like say it's in somebody else's hand or it's on the open ocean, you know it's a fish. You don't know, point value or anything, but you know it's a fish. So just to give you an idea. And there are some like Fisherfolk abilities that have stuff to do with the shadowed creature cards and whatnot. Now, how do you win? In a 2 to 4 player game, it's the first person to 7 or more sand dollars wins. In a 5 to 6 player game, it's whoever gets to 5 sand dollars or more wins. That's it. So get sea creatures, fulfill orders, get sand dollars, and whoever gets to 7 or 5, depending on the number of players, you win. Might seem a little complicated at first, and the card orientation thing is going to get a little taking used to. Kept messing it up the first time we played. Kept switching cards, flipping them. Because your instinct is to draw it and flip it right towards you, but you got to keep it the way it's facing on the table or in someone else's hand. Does not change orientation until your second phase. Flip it. Or flip. Or if you have a Fisherfolk that allows you to do something like that. They will all have different abilities that help you throughout the turn to do different things. So that's Fishy, Squishy, Crusty, Quirky by Unstable Games. And it's already up to 6 players. So unlike most of their games where it's like I think 4 players and then they add expansions that increase it. So I don't know if they're really going to do any expansions for this. Kind of like Garden Variety. I don't really know if they can do any expansions for that or not. Kind of just moving on to their new game, which hits Kickstarter. I think it's October 1st. So you should definitely check it out. And if you want to see some of their other games, check out I have an Unstable Games playlist. And you should subscribe. That way when the new game comes out, I'm going to do a video on it and check it out.